Hello, everyone. Welcome to the InsideSales.com Technology Summit, Accelerating Sales Through Science. This particular session is a simple guide to choosing your next sales tool. So if you're looking for the art and science of deflating footballs with Tom Brady, you're going to need to go find that elsewhere. That's not what we're here to talk about today. My name is Richard Harris, and I'm very excited to be joined by a good friend and partner, Max Altschüler, the CEO and founder of Sales Hacker. Max, how are you today?
Doing all right. Thanks for getting this together.
Yeah, it's funny. When I found out that you and I were going to do this session, it was kind of exciting because we work together fairly regularly. We trade texts, we talk about stuff, we talk about what's happening with Sales Hacker, the different events, the different shows, but we never really get a chance to always sit down and have this conversation about the technology stack, other than maybe in passing. So I'm glad that, we've got a good, 15 or 20 minutes to, go in depth on this and see what's happened in the last, 12 months, where it's going in the future, and then, of course, how to help people choose their best sales tool, right?
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting topic, something that we cover a lot on saleshacker.com, but never have we had a chance to really talk about it, especially with everything that's gone on recently, obviously Einstein, through Salesforce, and kind of a resurgence or revolution of sales technology with all the VC money that's gone into it lately, and some of the really bright minds, from MIT and, Harvard, wherever else, focusing on technology for salespeople, and it's an exciting time to be in sales.
Yeah, I totally agree. It feels like, the last couple of years we've been going through this renaissance of inside sales in particular, whether it's top of the funnel SDR, AE, or customer success, is that, we're getting smarter and we're being allowed to work smarter rather than harder in sales. So I'm really excited about this too. Just out of curiosity, before we jump into these 8 steps on choosing a sales tool, what have you seen in the last 12 months? What are you seeing in the future? I know 2 years ago you declared it the year of the SDR. This year, for this 2016, you declared it, the year of the sales stack. I don't know if you're ready to announce what you're going to call 2017, but just, overview, what are you seeing? You get this great 60,000-foot view. I know you know all these CEOs. You talk to them all the time, and you get this great vision that I think is what makes people want to follow you. What are you seeing these days?
Yeah, so at some point there's got to be a bundling with the technology that's currently available, and you see it with Salesforce buying up a bunch of companies. I think Google will actually jump into the mix. I think, LinkedIn and Microsoft will aggressively accelerate their acquisitions in technology for salespeople. I think you'll see Oracle and SAP starting to play a little bit more. Maybe a few other companies. You see Marketo just released Marketo ABM and Marketo for Sales. So there's a couple companies that'll start getting more involved, bundling those things together and offering like a suite of products. And then you've got people working on bots for sales. You've got companies working on kind of machine learning and AI and, data mining to surface really targeted versions of your ideal customer profile, help you find people that are ready to buy, or, based on certain triggers that are across the internet, that only you can find through really, scraping the web in a really brilliant manner. So I think it's very interesting where sales is going. I think, people buy from people, but what happens when you can buy from an endorsement instead of somebody directly selling to you, or somebody, like a G2 crowd that's doing, or a Trust Radius that's doing, buyer reviews for SaaS products. I mean, that's when things start to get really interesting, and those things hit critical mass. So I think in a couple more years we'll get there, but things are moving in that direction. We're talking about solving problems and not pushing products, and just the empathy coming out instead of the aggression, and the understanding of the buyer based on the information that's available to you because of these new technologies. So it's a really exciting time, and there's a lot changing, a lot happening.
Yeah, I really love that line. We're focusing on empathy, not aggression in sales, and I think that's so true. That's probably the biggest thing I've seen, and it's nice to see that sales is catching up to the rest of the world. Like the iPhone, right? We all thank Steve Jobs for this, is that we all want instant gratification, right? It's not a millennial thing as much as people like to say it. We all want that. We all expect it to just show up perfectly all the time. And I think we're at that stage, where sales and sales tools are just beginning to figure that piece out. IT and tech people figured that out a long time ago. Self-serve, in terms of buying an IT product, is now the grandfather of where I think sales wants to go. And it's not to say that salespeople are going away or SDRs are going away. It just means we all have to work smarter and be more intelligent about what we do. So thanks for sharing that. That was a really great insight. Well, let's go ahead and move forward sort of with what we're really trying to accomplish today, and talk about how to help people choose a sales school. So obviously we have myself and Max from Sales Hacker. We are glad to be here. We're super excited, and we want to thank InsideSales.com for asking us to do this. We really appreciate all that they're doing to be a part of the forefront of this, to lead some of this, themselves with walking the walk as well as talking the talk. So, oops, we're going a little fast. So, the first step that you need to do, right, is you're looking to decide on a tool is you got to define what your pain is, right? I think that's the most important thing to do. And, whether you're looking at somebody like an Inside Sales or any other communications platform, which is what I think is happening, you got to understand, what pain are you trying to solve? Max, as you talk to people and they're always asking, well, what tool do you recommend? Which tool do you recommend? And you've written some great books on that kind of stuff. How do you tell people to sort of slow down and define what it is they're trying to solve for first?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different pieces of technology out there, and if you were to try and Google one of them, what would you type in? Like, what would you type in to solve the problem that you have right now? Before you, take a look at any of these technologies, if you could define it down to, a sentence or even like a keyword string, then I think you've really figured it out. And then you can really start to adjust and decide, well, okay, what can we do manually? What do we need the technology for? And what are the most important features of that technology to help us solve that pain point?
Yeah, I think that's really great, which I think sort of leads to the next slide is, you got to decide why you need to solve this pain, right? I think that's what you're describing, right? Question everything, right? If you think you need a dialer, why do you need a dialer? If you think you need to register why emails are being opened so frequently, well, why do you need that? Is that what you're really alluding to?
Yeah, and you consult with a lot of different companies, and when people tell you they need a dialer and you push back to why, what do you usually get in response?
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of the time they fall into what I call the better, faster, cheaper syndrome. They all think they can do all three, but in reality, they're just trying to go cheaper and faster, right? They want a dialer, but they don't necessarily want to pay a lot of money for it. I'm like, well, then you're not solving the real pain. You don't know what your pain is, right? If they think that their pain is, well, I just want to reduce the number of clicks that an SDR has to do to make a phone call. Okay, that's fair. But why do you want to do that? So you increase this efficiency. What's the rep going to do with that level of efficiency, right? So those are the kind of conversations I get into. It's a good question. Moving from there, and this is the part where I think sales and marketing are really trying to do a much better job than they have in the past, is that whatever you do is going to affect everyone, right? The fact that Marketo, as you said, has now rolled out some new tools that are going to help focus on the sales team. They clearly understand that their tool is valuable to everybody, not just marketing, right? And we need to get people out of their silo mindset. So what have you seen around this? I know you work with different tools who are trying to partner together, or you might even be supporting different players. Anything specific you've seen that's unique?
Yeah, honestly, I see a lot of people using competing products for different areas of their sales force or revenue engine. So somebody used a competing product for their sales development reps, and another one for their account executives, and another one for their CSM team. And I don't honestly think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, I think in our little tech sphere, companies do things a little more. Uh, they overcomplicate things, so to speak.
Never.
You know, yeah, they'll try and get every little inch or every little percent of efficiency out of these tools, which is great, but like not at the cost of like installing and ripping out and retraining teams. So it's like you see some of these companies, these enterprise or unsexy, 10,000 person companies in the Midwest that you would have never heard of before. Tennessee Hospital System or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they'll install something and they'll leave it in. Whereas a lot of these, tech companies will have 3 different products for 3 different areas of their tech team. I think it's going a little bit overboard. So, find a solution that could really, give your entire organization the most benefit and then go with that one. And then, it's more about giving people the training on top of that and less about the actual, the technology, the pill, So, yep. I don't know. I don't think there's a wrong way to go about doing it, but I would say, find something that overlaps enough and helps everyone.
I completely agree, and I think again, like you said, in this technology space you and I are in most of the time, we see companies make decisions so fast without stopping to think it through. On the flip side, the companies in the Midwest take so long to make this decision, right? But sometimes that may be the wiser, right? It may be wiser to take an extra 30 days to engage marketing and sales on whether you're going to use tool A or tool B before you even trial it, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because that's about being better. And in the long run, that is faster and cheaper, not just installing a product and then 6 months having to replace it, right? That's a colossal waste of time for everybody. So, and I think that leads us to this, which is, it's a little bit, complicated, right? It's if you're a 10-person startup and you've got your first SDR or salesperson, it's an easy decision on making some of these technology calls, right? You can figure this out. When you get to these bigger companies, right? And Max, you and I both work with these larger companies where they would come to us to say, well, what's your best tool? What do you recommend? And we say, well, let's talk about that for a second. And I don't know what you experience, but sometimes I see eyes roll where I'm like, oh, you mean I actually got to go talk to this person and figure out what their input is? They're not really going to use the tool. And I say, well, yes, but they're affected by it. And the data that comes out of that tool is often what's more important than the tool itself. And so you need to figure out who's going to be touching that data. Mm-hmm. So Max, this is the part I think you speak to a lot, right? Researching with strangers is a good thing, right? You and I get this request all the time. People email Sales Hacker all the time to say, what do you know about this? What do you know about that? I think it may be where you even started the whole Sales Hacker concept. Is that kind of how this all came about for you way back when, 3 or 4 years ago?
I think people are talking to each other and sharing more than they ever did before. Obviously, with social, that's true, social media and all these networks. But, in the past, if you were in sales and you were selling to, mom and pop shops, you'd go hang out with where mom and pop shop owners, mm-hmm. Were. And now they actually hang out with other salespeople. I think that you're not as worried about, sharing information with your competitors, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. People are really into sharing. And, I'm a part of a couple of groups, especially our Sales Hacker, LinkedIn community, where people ask, hey, how do I make this buying decision? Or, what are the perks of going with this company over this company? So people are sharing more than ever before. And, you look at, again, G2 Crowd and Trust Radius and things like that. People are up to people. They just, they want everybody to be able to make the best decision, most informed decisions possible.
Yeah, I think some of it, too, is generational. I speak about this all the time, too, is that I'm a Gen Xer and you're a millennial, and I know you and I joke about this from time to time, but it's of my opinion that the millennials are much more comfortable either asking the question or sharing information, right? When I was growing up in sales and doing sales, if someone said, well, how'd you close that deal? I was like, oh, I don't know. I kept it a secret, right? It was like my secret playbook. I didn't want the other football team to get a copy of my playbook. here, there's in 2016, it's much more about teamwork. And through positive teamwork comes the individual achievement, right? Is that what you see? Like, what do you, that's my opinion as a Gen Xer looking at this. How do you see that on the flip side? Do you see the Gen Xers sort of trying to hold their secrets in a little bit more than the millennials?
No, well, yeah, maybe. I mean, I know that the millennials and the Gen Z folks are overshares, so we want to help.
That's fair. The interesting thing too is that this slide itself is actually a true statement. There is research that shows that when you ask and talk to strangers, it actually releases endorphins in your brain. When you have that small talk of, hey, how's your day? Or, hey, have a nice day with the cashier at wherever you're going, or just holding a door open for someone, that actually does send positive vibes to you. There's been a ton of psychological research on it. So I think this asking for strangers for that unbiased opinion is a tremendous, tremendous help in this process of choosing a sales tool. Yeah. That being said, you should still trust your friends, right? It's important. When I have a question, I'll go ask someone a question, then a lot of times I'll come back and say, Max, what do you know? Because Max does understand where I'm coming from, and he does know what I want, and vice versa. Max has asked me questions. Well, what do I think about this? And it's important to trust your friends and get them to help you, but you also don't want to have that tunnel vision, which is the piece about working with strangers. Max, how do you see that? I think you probably get asked questions all the time from people who are either total strangers or total friends. You're sort of the advice giver, the oracle of things. How are you experiencing it?
It's a no-brainer. If you're working in a sales ops position, you probably have some other friends that are, companies that are similar to you. Why not ask what they did? Why not ask why they did it? I think advice should always be given in context of a story, and not direct advice, because what works for someone else might not work for you. There's a lot of other variables, but, it would be nonsensical not to, reach out to somebody in a similar position to ask for that advice.
I think that's great, and that's a great line I want to repeat, is that advice is best given and received probably as a story, as opposed to what I always say. My mother comes to town and says, well, what you should do is, I'm like, Mom, I've been living on my own for a while. I think I know how to unload the dishwasher. Thank you. So, last thing, defining success, right? And it's about attention to detail. And I think this is going to lead us up to the next most important slide. How often, Max, are you seeing people making decisions because they want to make the decision as opposed to defining the success of that decision? Do you see that happening a lot?
Yeah, I think with first-time software buyers, you'll see that fairly often. People just are focused on getting the stack in place and not understanding, what does it look like once it's in place in terms of what would you call a successful build-out?
Yeah, excellent. Which really leads us to, how do you do this, right? If you're looking at a sales tool, these are the things that I think needs to happen, is that you first want to say, hey, if we're going to implement a tool like X, we want the sales reps to do blank, blank, and blank better, right? This is what we're trying to define. This is what we're trying to improve. And respectfully, this isn't about a sales tool. It could be a marketing tool. It could be an engineering tool. It could be hiring a consultant. It could be 1,000 things that could go into these blanks. The other thing that I think people often do is they do question one. They don't necessarily go to question two, is, how are we going to actually measure that improvement, right? If we're going to implement this tool for communications, we expect to see these types of metrics increase, or these KPIs increase. And then you also have to define your baseline. I know this is attention to detail. This is that part that's attention to detail, right? Do we even have a baseline for these numbers? And if you don't, then the first thing you're going to do, and Max, tell me if I'm wrong, is you implement a new tool, you're going to need to establish a baseline for 30, 60, or 90 days. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So,
that sounds right.
And if you don't know what your baseline is going to be, you've got to define that timeline. This is the part that I see startups getting so frustrated with, right? Where it's like better, faster, cheaper. They want to go faster and cheaper. They don't want to do this part, which is going to make it better. and in the long run will make it faster and cheaper. And then the last thing you have to do is you have to define your level of success. You have to create a hypothesis, right? The goal, and I've been saying this for a while now, is that it's not so much that you define a sales process. You need to define a sales hypothesis, right? Whether it's around a tool, whether it's around your actual sales process, whether it's around your sales cycle, whatever it is. And then you need to either prove it or disprove that process. If you can prove it, great. If your hypothesis was wrong, that's okay too. You learned something. And I think that people often overlook that piece. And particularly when looking at sales, that's when they like to start to point the finger. And so I think that's a really important piece, that if you define these pieces ahead of time and can define that having a hypothesis is important, and whether or not it's right or wrong is not the most important thing. It's a question of what do you learn from the results you build around that hypothesis. And then the last thing is make sure you go through trials with all these companies. I think Max knows this really well. They're all willing to give you 15, 30-day trials. Do it. It's a great way to actually get your SDRs or your sales team some additional responsibility. Let them be the owner of it. They're the ones who are going to use it. So don't be afraid to do that. Go through an intelligent trial. Don't feel like the manager has to control the entire piece of it. And with that, those are the 8 steps we talk about in terms of doing evaluating a sales flow and bringing it in. If you have any questions for Max or myself, this is a couple places you can get a hold of us. We'd love to talk to you. We always take conversations. It's just good karma. So we're willing to do that and put ourselves out there and just share our knowledge with you. So thank you and everyone for joining us. We are very excited that you could join us for the InsideSales.com Technology Summit. Thank you on behalf of Sales Hacker. Thank you on behalf of InsideSales.com. Max, any closing words, or are we good to go?
Nope, you've got it. Thanks for quarterbacking this, and definitely reach out to us if you have any questions.
Great. Take care, Max. I'll catch you on the other side.
Cool.